Hello from Alcorobi in Catalonia. This is the project's been going on now since 2012, 2013, when I actually had to go to court because I'd accidentally caused a forest fire at the back of the land here, and I promised the firemen and the police and the judge that I would actually build something that they could use to put out any future fires, and we haven't had any since, but we've had some very dry summers. So with that in mind, and as a permaculturist, I wanted to build something which was more than just a fire retardant. I wanted to build something that was useful, practical for the land I was living on. So here it is, and this is 10 years work, and it's a lot of hard work, and it caused me 2 hernias, which I've managed to get through. Basically because I'm recycling a lot of material on the land in the form of lots of rocks from dismantled walls, excavations from the ground, and just generally my sort of outdoor lifestyle of looking for stuff all the time and grabbing it and throwing it in the back of a van. So what you can see here are coffee sacks and recycled coffee sacks, which I brought all the way from London, held in by what we call mayaso or wire mesh. And these coffee sacks, in fact, are completely free. People do try to sell them on eBay, but if you go to a coffee maker, they will give you them for free because they can only use them once. And the reason being is because they have a coffee beetle, so they can't reuse them for coffee. So they give them away to zoos. And I was hoping I would get some of the employees actually come over here and help me build this structure as part of a sort of thank you return gift. So when I first built this, it was maybe 2013 when I came back from the Palestine bicycle ride. Literally, where I'm standing now was the first set of stones that I put around, and I've basically done everything by eye. Yeah, so there's a circular set of stones right underneath where I'm standing now, and I started to build upwards, and I started using all this surplus stone from around the land, pulling it in from different directions, and then I was running out of big stones, and so that's when the idea of using sacks came to me. I could actually utilize dismantled dry stone walls, which were full of smaller stones. So I started filling up sacks, and I was beginning to get a little bit more height and a bit more height. And then I realised it came to a point where you can't go any higher without the structure collapsing. So I started facing one side, and that meant backfilling. I don't know if you can see it here. It meant backfilling these facade stones, and that gave it more strength. It means that the structure couldn't move outwards anymore, but it also meant that it actually got a little bit more wider from the initial vision that I had for this structure. So it got a little bit more wider, but that's really strong now. These facade stones were also collected and put to one side, and now, as you can see, they've been jointed up in various places. And I use a little a rechargeable drill with a wire brush on it to clean up in between the gaps and any spillages and that type of thing. So that isn't quite finished, but as I went around, I realised that I could actually create small areas where water can escape, but at the same time maybe even create small shrines. So I do want to emphasise this point. My lifestyle is very spiritual, in my opinion. I travel, meet culture, and I get lots of ideas, but I'm engaged by lots of different spiritual peoples, including many Muslims on my travels, because I've been through lots of Muslim countries, including Christians. But the idea of creating shrines that where you get a small candle, as you would do if you saw Mary Mother Virgin, a shrine in a Catholic country like France or Poland or something like that, you see lots of little candles lit up all around the countryside, and that's a dominant memory in my cycling journeys. The amount of religious shrines I've seen. So I'm not saying this is necessarily just a religious structure, but it's certainly been inspired by my spiritual encounters. So that's just looking at it from an aesthetic value, but as a permaculturist, I also have to be very, very practical. So I started to come up with different uses, and then I went to Africa, and I started helping them build a large fish tank made out of abandoned truck tires, and then they put a skin in there and filled up with water, and it's full of lilies and tilapia fish. And that's an important source of protein in very poor countries. They do it in India, they do it in South America, they do it in Africa. Tilapia fish, because they're very disease resistant, they look after themselves, they manage the pond to a certain degree. So that was a sort of another way of looking at my protein needs on the land. If I'm going to try and live sustainably and as off the grid as I possibly can, it's either that or rabbits, yeah? So fish. So then I started thinking, okay, I'm going to create a structure which is an ecological pond. It's going to be self-oxygenating, self-cleaning to a certain degree, and it's going to have fish in there, and I'll probably go and have the occasional dip with the fish as well, right? But why did I build it circular? Well, if you look at the way the trees are dispersed around the land, it's maximising the amount of space I had available to actually build structure. Even the outdoors kitchen over there is a circular structure. The cemetery at the other corner is a circular structure also. And this was originally going to be somewhere next to the neighbour's land, not far from here. But he actually came over the fence and he said to me, you know, you can't build this close, for legal reasons, you can't build this close to the border because you're right next to my own wall. So I said, oh, okay. And so I asked him what the legal differences, the legal distances were, and he told me it was something like 30 meters. So I had to build 30 meters from a legal boundary. Yeah. So I said, okay, I'm going to move it. So then I found this spot, and it's actually a field full of carob trees, and the name of this project is called Al Qurrabi. So what I want to say is there are certain dynamics about circular structures, and I was also studying at the time some of the works of Schauberger. Now, Schauberger looked at the energy and the way energy moves, and there was a sort of moment in Western history when we could have harnessed implosive energy rather than explosive energy, which we would see in the internal combustion engine, for instance. Yeah, implosive energy, Schauberger said, was much more powerful if you could tap into it, and so he started looking at tornadoes, whirlpools. He started looking at anything like the water in a sink. When you pull out the plug, you can see it going down, and it's like concentrating energy to a really fine point. And the inspiration he got was one day when he was taking a visit to a pool. Had a waterfall there somewhere. He noticed that when the water was a particular temperature, which he named the anomaly point, it was 4 degrees centigrade, he realised that stones could actually float. And why is that? Because water is at its most dense at 4 degrees. So colder than that, water becomes less dense, and warmer than that, water becomes also less dense. So it's an anomaly point. So he realised stones could float, and then he started making a living building flues where he took 4-degree water from rivers, and he transported logs from a forest, working on behalf of a duke or a prince or something like that. So he was well paid, and he became very, very rich. So then he could experiment with water and his future experiments. The other thing he said about ecology is that this type of density, this temperature of the water actually gives life. So he started looking at river systems, and he started looking at food systems in the river, and he noticed that the fish followed the different temperature grades within rivers, because that's where food could be found. So he saw food suspended in 4-degree water, and that's where all the fish hung about. And that generally was somewhere in the middle of a river. So it was warmer to the edges, but it was colder and more 4 degrees to the middle. So the fish followed this current because there was a lot more suspended food. Yeah, makes sense? So he started looking at the purification values of water, and why water travelling in whirlpools, natural eddies and that type of thing, generated more oxygen, and it killed bacteria and that type of thing as well. So people decades afterwards started looking at his experiments and saying, can we create purification systems? When you go to a swimming pool, when you go to a lot of square structures that contain water, like fish tanks and that type of thing, you realise that you have to use technology to keep that water clean, right? You have to use aerators, pumps and all sorts of things, yeah? Why? Because water isn't moving in square structures. Where you get corners, edges and that type of thing, water gets trapped, and that's where you get bacterial buildup. So the idea of a round structure is that, and especially an oval one in the shape of an egg, is that water could travel around and oxygenate itself. And the creation of oxygen ions would actually kill bacteria. And there are now technologies today exploring that type of technology for domestic uses in homes, where they are spraying water to kill bacteria because it creates ions or oxygen free. So, so having looked at and using that as a sort of inspiration for what I want to create, I followed his ideas in looking at the natural evolution of an egg and seeing how the whirlpool or the eddy that you may find in a river or in a sea or other water body can be replicated in an egg-shaped purification system. So I want to see if I can push water around here and maximize its ecology and its energy by creating more oxygen ions. Yeah, and that way we don't get bacteria build-up, and that way it means I could probably use the water for many more things. Okay, so that's the practical value, and obviously I'm going to use it to irrigate the land with a set of pumps inside and outside, and also I'm going to allow the firemen to be able to plug into it and put out any potential fires in the future. But in terms of spiritual values and sort of more human-based systems, the idea came to me that as a body of water, there may be a certain amount of energy here that we could tap into on a sort of very unconscious level. So people who want to come and practice yoga, forms of martial arts or meditation techniques and that type of thing, can actually do it on top of a body of water. And so that's the other idea I have. Now, some of it's all pseudoscience or maybe metaphysics. I don't have a logical explanation for a lot of my ideas. But certainly, it doesn't stop me from experimenting. It doesn't stop me from making a structure which principally is very, very practical and very strong. So the initial edge and initial size of the what I call the temple to Gaia, has been doubled in size, because what I realized is that I needed to reinforce the inside, and to be able to build up to this height, I literally had to create a natural buttressing effect so that the weight pushed inwards rather than outwards. And that followed the pattern thinking of creating an oval shape, an egg. So as you can see in there, I've used this wire meshing to contain all of these bags. It bought me a lot of time because the bags rot eventually. And come sometime in the future, I don't know when, but especially now when I can earn quite a lot of money, I can invest in plastering the inside with a lot more concrete and creating a skin once I've got the point of my egg form shaped, and then I can think about making it waterproof and putting the pumps into place, and then adding the actual water. And where the water is going to come from, well, I'm going to have to buy it in originally, but as I was explaining earlier, once every few years we get complete floods over the land, and so I can create a system where I can pump flood water into this system, which hopefully will hold 120 to 150,000 litres. So this isn't the depth it's going to be, and it's not the height it's going to be. It's going to get higher, and I will probably build some sort of platform across the top so that students can come and explore these types of principles and practice their types of spiritual or aesthetic values here, you know. So, I mean, as a video which I want to keep short, I hope you understand and take all of that in. Remember, my inspiration comes from Mother Earth. It comes from great thinkers like Schauberger and Tesla and those types of people. And when I looked at this structure and then I saw what Elon Musk was building for SpaceX, there was a very close similarity, only that he was going to plant a rocket on top of his to go to Mars, and I'm going to plant a temple on top of mine. So such that I think I should call it a day. Thank you.